Good morning, and welcome to this worship service of New Life Lutheran Church, Dripping Springs, Texas. I am transitional pastor Jamie Buzard, and I am extraordinarily privileged to be with you in this worship service. This congregation is near and dear to me and in my heart, as I had a hand in getting it started some years ago, and am so happy that it is prospering and becoming a blessing to so many people beyond the boundaries of the land or of any walls of which the church has none. So glad to have you here with us. Welcome and enjoy this day, for this is the day that the Lord has made, so we will rejoice and be glad in it. I begin with the gospel reading from Matthew the 16th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. Then Jesus told his disciples, If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The Gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Grace and peace be with you. We are in my study because we've had technical difficulties and filming the sermon outside just did not work. So, my apologies. We'll try to be outside whenever possible, as is in keeping with the character of the congregation. Well, if you have ever used an iPhone, you know the joys and perils of Siri. Sometimes Siri is spot on. Siri, who won the World Series in 1987? The Minnesota Twins beat the St. Louis Cardinals 4-3. Siri, how many miles is 100 kilometers? 62,000.137. But then there are those other times. From a web page of epic Siri fails, we find, Siri, I think I have alcohol poisoning. What should I do? I have found 7 liquor stores near you. Siri, how do I get my baby to sleep? This hotel is not far from you. Except it was a pet hotel, and who's going to leave their baby at a hotel to get the baby to sleep? Well, speaking of pets, Siri, my cat ate a glow stick. I'm sorry. Sympathy was not exactly what the woman was looking for. And then, Siri, how may I help you? Turn off the music. Playing all songs. Siri can be spectacularly wrong, but so can people. Jesus was talking to his friends about what it meant that he was, just as Peter said, the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Much to their surprise, this Messiah business is going to be messy business, with persecution, suffering, even death. God forbid it, Lord, Peter says, and our first century Siri gets rebuked when Jesus, who had glowing reviews for Peter's insight last week, now calls him Satan. Why? Because he is bringing an unholy, sin-soaked perspective to Jesus' mission, wherein the crown Peter seeks is gold, not thorns, and the throne is a massive, not a massive chair, is a massive chair, but not a cross. But Jesus' way, God's way, will never conform to human ways. To make matters worse, apparently Jesus' way is not just his way, but it is to be the way of anyone who would bear his name. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Now, that take up their cross bit, there are not a lot of crucifixions going on nowadays, but I think we can reinterpret that to mean even if it cost our lives. Well, if it is worth even our lives to follow Jesus, it must be that practicing our faith is yes, for those extreme circumstances we likely won't ever face, like crucifixion. But then it must be that following Jesus is so much more important for our daily living. How much, even more so, for daily living is it to follow him? But that's where things get tricky, because the vast majority of our living is done quietly, ordinarily, not in those extreme circumstances. And I say it's tricky because we aren't inclined to warmly embrace that part about denying ourselves. I still hear the echoes of a marketing slogan for a product I have never used, L'Oreal makeup. But that is what I would buy because, as the ads say, L'Oreal, because I'm worth it. Denying ourselves has not exactly been our habit while cocooning these past months. We still want stuff, more stuff than we need, and we want it exactly to our specifications, and we want a choice of colors. And what do you mean it can't be delivered overnight? Self-denial is for the St. Francis of Assisi and Albert Schweitzer and Mother Teresa types, not for us ordinary mortals. But hear what Jesus said again. If anyone would follow me. If anyone would follow me. So the call to follow is not just for the superheroes of the faith. It's for all of us, because all of us follow a master whose life was one of obedience and self-denial. Now let me be clear. Self-denial can be taken to an extreme. Considering our own needs is not sinful. Our bodies need care. Food and drink are good gifts to be enjoyed. Jesus said not just deny ourselves, but he also said love our neighbors as ourselves. And that's the corrective to extreme self-denial. Love for ourselves. The problem is that we usually love ourselves so much that we forget the neighbor entirely. We make self-pleasing the goal and the guide of our lives. And that's when we most deeply appreciate a sermon like the one offered by the preacher in J.D. Salinger's other book, Franny and Zoe. The preacher said, I don't want you to go away from this service with the impression that there's any inconvenience involved with the religious life. I mean, a lot of people don't take it up just because they think it's going to involve a certain amount of nasty application and perseverance. You know what I mean. So as soon as we get out of chapel here, I hope you'll accept a little volume I've always admired. God is my hobby. No, God is not a hobby. And I even cringe a bit inside when I hear someone say, my faith is an important part of my life. I understand what they're saying, but it makes faith sound like a piece of a pie that sits right next to the other pieces, maybe one marked family, one marked work, one marked money. Maybe when Jesus is saying deny ourselves, we're to consider faith the pie in which all the other parts find their place. So, my family is not isolated from my faith, but because of my faith, I try to love them with Christ's love. My work is not isolated from my faith. Instead, my faith means that when I teach, I do so with a prayer that through my words and with patience, students will know something of God's love. And my money is not isolated from my faith. Instead, my faith means my money's purpose cannot be solely for me, that with gratitude and generosity I share it for the sake of Christ and the good news he brings. So then, what does self-denial look like? The daily kind. It's taking all the parts of our life and seeing them through new eyes, the eyes of faith. It's not so much about avoiding personal pleasure as it is being faithful to the commitments of our lives, be it in a marriage or children or work. And it's about making choices that are most in line with our faith, even if it is personally inconvenient or costly to do so, or even embarrassing. Surely we can't ignore that one aspect of following Jesus where he says, "Go make disciples." He didn't say, "Go make disciples," unless you find it embarrassing, in which case, just keep quiet. Now, I don't expect or even think it's helpful to go stand on a street corner and preach, but maybe we can consider inviting a friend or neighbor to church, especially when we're back on the land. Research by the Lifeway Group out of Nashville found that only 2% of all Christians in the United States have ever invited someone to church. So what else does denying ourselves and following Jesus look like? Well, it means love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, which I take to mean not just Sunday mornings, and to love our neighbors as ourselves, and not just the nice ones. We're to love even those who vote the other way, or who are raising their kids like wolves, or who could graze cattle on their lawn because they never cut it. When your commitment to follow is in place, then you learn what to do in daily living and what to do when hard choices come along. This last May, a 19-year-old college student in Albuquerque found a bag with $135,000 in cash sitting next to an ATM. Jose Nunez Romanes could have kept it, but it didn't cross his mind. Instead, he called the cops and turned it in. Another student who I actually know found herself in a professor's office. The professor had stepped out for a moment, leaving behind a stack of tests that were to be given, even in her class. "I can't say I didn't think about taking one," she said, "but I knew what was right. Too much church, I guess." And then I think of all those who, like John Lewis once did, who are peacefully protesting injustice and refusing to answer violence with violence. Yes, there are some people acting violently in the protests against racial injustice in our country, but the vast majority act with peace in their hearts and refusing to revenge. That is nothing but self-denial in its work clothes. All of this, though, leads to a question. Jesus says, if anyone would follow me, which means, well, there are options. There are options. We don't have to, and a reasonable question is, why should we follow him? If we do, we run the risk of being thought naive, wide-eyed do-gooders who don't know how this world really operates, who don't seem to get it that it's everyone for himself or herself. Get what you can while you can. And suffer? Not if I can help it. Follow a fellow who winds up on a cross? No, thank you. Except listen again for the words that Peter probably missed, too upset by the other words. And on the third day, be raised. And on the third day, be raised. Raised because Jesus' way is the right way, a way of life that is abundant now and abundant always. You see, as you learn to deny yourself, that is, as you learn to break the cycle of being turned in on yourself, you can be cracked open to live in a way that blesses others. You see, you don't have to live for yourself. You don't have to do that because you don't have to be afraid. Hear it again. And on the third day be raised. It wasn't just Jesus talking about himself. He was telling those who would follow that you are held in a death-breaking grip of love. So you're free to love others and to love God's world with passion, even if it means suffering, because suffering isn't the last word after all. It's life, new life, and it's ours to share. You probably don't remember the name Arland Williams. He was a passenger on an Air Florida flight that crashed into the icy Potomac in January of 1982. There were just 6 survivors who stayed partially afloat in the tail section of the jet. A helicopter hovered over and extended a rope and then would drag the passenger to shore. Arland Williams caught the rope again and again, but then passed the rope again and again. But when it was finally his turn, the tail section of the jet slipped under the water and took him with it. Later, when his family and friends were interviewed, they said they weren't surprised. All of his earlier commitments to caring and selflessness equipped him to keep passing the lifeline to others, even when his own terror had to be crying for him to cling to the line. Was he a Christian? I don't know. But I do know we are to be in his kind of work, passing the lifeline to others. That's our work as individuals and as New Life Lutheran Church. Might we suffer? Probably not physically. But might we suffer if we fail? Get behind me, Satan, Jesus would say, for those are the cares of the world, not of God. Get behind us, Satan, because for our sake, Jesus was obedient even to death. But on the third day he did rise, and he is risen still, and so shall we. Amen.